Hi, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video, we're going to learn the 2 to 4 player Living Forest, designed by Aska Christensen and published by Ludonaut, who helped sponsor this video. The sacred tree of the forest is under attack from the fiery Onibi, and is one of the 4 spirits of nature you'll work to protect your woodland home and show that you are the spirit most deserving of the title of Grand Protector. So join me at the table, and let's learn how to play. To set up, sort the cards with this back by their faces, putting them in piles based on the symbols found in their bottom right-hand corners. You'll make 3 groups with these sun symbols, each with their own shaded color. There are 4 groups that show 4 different spirits of the forest, which you'll group them by. This final group of cards shows no symbol in the corner, but they all look the same, so they're very easy to identify. In the center of the play area, you'll put these face up onto the space for them of what is known as the Fire Varan board, setting what are known as these Fragment tiles to their left. Then set what is known as the Guardian Animal board in a central area as well, adding the decks with matching sun symbols to the spaces indicated for them after giving them a good shuffle. And each of these you'll set face down. In the area to the left of these decks, you'll also place each of these related fire tokens. The ones labeled with a 2 go in this top area beside the top deck. These 3s will go here, and the 4s go on the bottom. Next to this board, deal 4 cards from each deck face up into a row so that it looks something like this when you're done. Nearby, also set this Circle of Spirits board, putting a value 2 fire token in its center. These trays are for holding the protective tree tiles which you put in their matching slots based on the symbols found here on the tray that also match the symbols found on the related tiles. You'll then have 4 tiles left over which don't show a symbol on the bottom, and these you'll set aside for use later. The tops of the trays will also tell you how many of each tile should remain in each slot based on whether you have 2, 3, or 4 players. Any extras you return to the box. In this video, we'll assume we have 2 players, so that means we go by the first values. So for example, in these 3 slots, we should have only 2 tokens each. When you're done, keep these trays in the central area as well. Now give each player one of these forest boards in the color of their choosing, returning any extras back to the box. Each player then takes the 1 tree from the 4 that were set aside earlier that matches the one pictured in the center of their board and sets it there. You also collect the spirit standee matching your color, along with the 3 victory tokens that have your spirit pictured on them and the deck of cards showing your spirit symbol in the corner. Then shuffle your deck into a face-down pile by this area of your board. Now randomly pick someone to gain this sacred tree standee, making them the first player. They'll set their personal spirit onto this Circle of Spirits board, looking for the space that shows the number of pawns for their number of players, 2 in this case, that has the first of those pawns highlighted in white. They'll set their figure on that space, and then the next player seated in clockwise order puts their spirit onto the space, again showing a number of pawns equal to the number of players, but this time with the next pawn symbol highlighted in white. So in this case, they'd place their spirit here. And that's the setup. The game also has separate solo rules that can be downloaded online, and I'll put a link to them in the description of this video if you're interested. In Living Forest, each player will be taking actions in an effort to prove themselves the best able to protect the forest from the attacks of the terrible Onibi. And they will do this by being the first to accomplish one of the 3 possible goals of the game. One option is to be the first to collect 12 of these fire tokens. Their values don't matter. What's important is that you gain 12 individual tokens. You start with these 3 victory tokens, and the one showing a fire symbol counts as one of the tokens you need to win. So in this case, we actually have 13 fire tokens. Another way to win is to plant 12 unique trees on your board, most coming from these trays that we set up earlier. However, you also start with 1 tree tile on your board, and this tree symbol victory token also counts as well. So you actually begin the game with 2 of the 12 trees you need. The final way you can win is by playing cards from your deck that show a total value of 12 in these sacred flower symbols. And we'll see how you play cards later, but notice you start with 1 of the 12 sacred flowers you need on 1 of your victory tokens. How you collect fire, plant trees, and play sacred flowers we'll learn about very soon. The game is played over a series of rounds, broken into 3 phases each, starting with the Guardian Animals phase. Every player performs this phase at the exact same time. You don't take turns. Instead, you'll draw cards from your deck one at a time, setting them face up in front of you in a row known as your Guardian Animal Helpline. And you can overlap them to save space. Just make sure you can still see the symbols showing on their left edge. And you keep drawing as many as you like and can stop any time, but keep an eye out for these black circle symbols at the top of some Guardians. These are known as solitary symbols, and as soon as you've placed a third one in your line, you must stop drawing. In the next phase, as we'll see, you normally get to perform 2 actions, but if your line has 3 black symbols, you only get to perform 1 action. You will want to play as many cards as you can because their other symbols will help you in later phases, but you may stop early if you think you might draw a third black circle. If you're curious, each player's deck is the exact same, and they each contain 5 cards that show those black circle symbols. As we'll see later, you may acquire some of these fragment tokens, and during this phase, if you have any, you may spend them to return a card you've just drawn to your discard pile here, instead of adding that card to your line. For example, if I had just drawn my third black circle and I had a fragment, I could return it back to the supply, sending this card to my discard pile. Now I can keep drawing if I like or just stop, but either way, I kept a third black circle from entering my line. You can spend as many fragments as you like during this phase, but each will only remove the card you've just drawn, not any that are already placed in your line. Your deck doesn't start with any cards showing this white circle, known as the gregarious symbol, but they can end up in your deck later, as we'll see. Each of these symbols that enter your row allow you to ignore any one other black circle symbol. So although I had one black circle symbol, now it's as if I don't. And if I drew another white circle, this would then cancel any future black circle I drew. So where the black circle is in the row doesn't matter. These white circles can target any of them. And in a situation like this, now I would only have too many black circles if I ended up drawing like this. These 2 have been canceled, but these 3 are still active, and now I'm forced to stop. It's worth pointing out the white symbols only cancel the black symbols on the card. All the other symbols on this card are still considered available for you to use, and we'll see how these are used a little later. As an aside, if you ever run out of cards in your deck, nothing happens unless you still need to draw. At that point, and only at that point, you take the cards in your discard pile and then shuffle them into a new deck to continue drawing from. And that's how you draw cards into your Guardian Animal Helpline. And once everyone has either drawn 3 black circles or chosen to stop before that happens, this phase ends and we move on to the action phase. Here, players take 1 turn each, starting with the person holding the sacred tree and going clockwise around the table. And on your turn, you either take 2 different actions, or if you have 3 black circles that aren't being canceled by white circles in your line, you only take 1 action. If you're getting to take 2 actions, the important thing to understand is that they must be 2 different actions. And there are 5 different actions to choose from. So let's go through each one, starting with the Plant 1 Protective Tree action. Certain symbols found on the cards in your line will boost the strength of the action that you've chosen to take. In the case of the planting action, you'll pay attention to these symbols that show a plant icon. You then add together all the values shown by those plant symbols to get your total planting strength, which in this case is a total of 5. You now use that planting strength to buy, at most, any one protective tree tile from these trays that has an equal or lower cost. Their cost is shown here in their top right corners. So with my planting strength of 5, I could buy any one of these tiles, and let's say I choose this one. I now immediately place this into any empty space of my board that is adjacent to any other tile I already have there, noting that diagonal spots do not count as adjacent. So this tile couldn't go here, but maybe I set it here. Many tree tiles provide you with a benefit represented by the symbols found at its bottom, and if so, you gain that benefit right away. So if I had a second action to take this turn, I could use this benefit if it applied. And we'll see how the different benefits work over the course of this video, but just as an example, with this tree on my board, it would always provide me with a plant symbol towards buying future trees. So on a future turn, if I had these cards in my line, I would now have a total planting strength of 1, 2, 3, 4. The other tile benefits we'll learn as we go, but I should mention this one as it's quite unique. Remember I said earlier, if you get to take 2 actions on your turn, they must be different actions. On this tile, you'll find the symbol that represents taking an action. And if you have this tree planted on your board, it means both actions you take in a turn can be the exact same. As the game continues and you plant additional trees, you may eventually put a tree into one of these 4 corner spaces. Now these 2 work the same way. After you cover one, you collect 2 of these fragment tokens from the supply and put them in front of yourself. These other 2 effects we'll learn about later. Before moving on, remember, one of the ways to win the game is to be the first to have a total of 12 different planted trees in front of you. And this also includes your starting tree, which is unique from every other tree in the game, and also the tree printed on your victory token here, which is also unique from every other tree and token in the game. So right now I have 1, 2, 3 of the 12 trees I need. You can buy and plant a tree you already have a copy of, but it doesn't advance you towards the winning condition of having 12 unique trees. With that understood, let's move on to one of the other actions you can take on your turn, attracting 1 or more guardian animals. Here you instead add up the values shown by this sun symbol on the cards in your line. So here I have a total strength of 2, -2, +2, and +3, so a total strength of 5. Also add any strength you get from the matching symbols on the trees you've planted. So here we'd get 2 more. Not only that, pay attention to any of those symbols on the outside edges of your board. This one, for example, would increase your strength by 1 as long as you've filled the column above it with tree tiles. These other symbols work the same way. They'll become available to contribute their strength to the related actions once their columns or rows have been filled with trees. So don't forget to include these totals when you're taking the related actions. Either way, with this guardian animal action, you then take 1 or more of the face-up guardians here who have a total cost in their bottom right-hand corner equal to or less than the sun symbol strength you generated for this action. Let's say that I bought these 2. The guardians you acquire you then set in any order you like on top of your draw deck. But do not replace the cards you drew from the face-up display. These spots will remain empty. And that's the attract 1 or more guardian animals action. Next, let's learn the Extinguish Fire action. Here you add up all the water symbols you've generated in your line, 4 in this case, and from trees on your board, or the edge of the board symbols that you've unlocked. Remember, to unlock this additional water, you need to have filled in all of these spaces above it with trees. You may then pick any number of fire tokens to extinguish from the Circle of Spirits board with a total printed value equal to or less than your water strength. The game starts with just 1 token there, but let's assume we had these there as well. With my strength of 5, I could remove 2 2s, or maybe a 2 and a 3, or even just a 2 or a 3. You don't have to remove as many as you could. Either way, you then collect the fire tokens that you have chosen to extinguish and place them face down in front of yourself. Remember, one of the ways to win is to collect 12 fire tokens, and the values on their other side don't matter, only the number of tokens counts. So this value 3 fire token is no more valuable than this 2-point token. And don't forget, this fire victory token counts as one of the required fire tokens as well, so right now I have 3. The next action we're going to look at is called Taking a Fragment, and it's a bit different from all the others. For this action, you don't use any of the symbols in your card help line. Instead, you just take 1 fragment tile from the supply to put in front of you. The final action you have to pick from is called Moving Forward on the Circle of Spirits. For this action, we go back to totaling the strength found on the cards you've played and those found on your player board which show this symbol. So in this case, we have a total of 2. Then advance your spirit's standee on this board that number of spaces clockwise, resolving the symbol of the space that you land on. These will relate to actions we already saw previously. For example, this one allows you to collect 1 fragment token. This lets you perform the Plant 1 Protective Tree action. This lets you extinguish fire. And this lets you acquire 1 or more guardians. These are all considered bonus actions. They don't count against your normal limit of taking 1 or 2 actions on your turn. And the bonus action can even be the same as one of the actions you've already performed or will perform that turn. For example, if my first action was to perform the Extinguish Fire action with the water symbols I have, and then as my second action, I moved my spirit forward and landed on the Extinguish Fire space, I would use the same water symbols I'd used before to extinguish even more fire if I want. The only requirement is that you must advance at least 1 space to be able to resolve the action of the spot you moved into. Now, while performing this action that causes you to advance on the circle, you may end up moving past the space an opponent's piece is in. If so, you don't count that space. So if I was moving 4 from here, I'd count it like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Not only that, but each time you hop over another player, you take any one of the victory tokens they might have, which are the ones shaped like this. And you could even take one that maybe they took from another player earlier. Let's say I decided to take this one. I now have another unique tree to count towards the 12 I need to win because these tokens are always considered unique. And with that, we've covered all the different actions, but there's one thing we should go back and discuss. On your board, you have these two spaces, and if you cover this one with a tree, you then get to perform a bonus attract one or more Guardian's animal action. But in addition to all the sun symbols you have, you add an additional 3. Likewise, if you cover this space, you get to do a bonus extinguish action using all the water symbols you have and adding an extra 2. So to summarize, during the action phase, in turn order, each player will take either 1 or 2 different actions depending on whether or not they have 3 active black circles on their face-up row of cards. But once the action phase is over, this brings us to the end of round phase, which is broken into 5 steps. First, our enemy, the terrible Onibi spirit, attacks the players. Total the value of the fire tokens on the Circle of Spirits board. Then each player compares this to the total water value they have on the cards in front of them and on their player board. To be clear, each player is doing this individually. You're not combining your water values. And you're also not extinguishing any fires. You're just checking to see how your personal water value compares to the current fire value. If your value is equal to or higher than the fire value, nothing happens, which is good. On the other hand, if your water value is less than the fire value, you now collect a number of these fire cards from the stack here equal to the number of fire tokens within the circle, so 2 in this case. You then add these cards to your personal discard pile, where as we saw earlier, they'll be shuffled back into your deck once your deck runs out and you need to draw more cards. If you ever draw one of these when building your line in a future round, they not only have a black circle, they provide no beneficial symbols. These are just bad. However, if you draw one, you can still use a fragment token to keep it from going to your line, but instead of putting it into your discard pile, you send it right back to the stack. I should also mention, if you know you're going to run out of cards in this stack when they need to be taken, distribute them as evenly as possible in turn order to the players who need them until they run out. And if the stack ever does run out, ignore any penalties that would cause players to collect them. The next step of this phase is when Onibi attacks the sacred tree. Here, you move 1 fire token from this row over to the circle board for each card that was taken from this row this round. For each card taken from this row, you add one of these tokens, and you do the same again for this row, adding these tokens instead. If you ever run out of tokens to add from a row, let's say we needed to add a value 2 token, but these stacks were empty, you can just swap for what you need from tokens players might have in front of themselves. In this case, we need to add a value 2 token to the board. We don't have one. So we could take one from a player and then give them back any one of these other tokens, because remember, players don't care about the values on the tokens, just the number of tokens that they have. Now fill the spaces in these rows with new cards drawn from their related decks. I should mention, if a deck ever runs out, just leave that space empty, and in future turns, don't add fire tokens to the circle for empty card spaces that exist because a deck ran out. Fire is only added to the sacred circle for each card that was taken from a row during that round. Next, each player moves all the cards in their help line to their personal discard pile here. And finally, the person holding the sacred tree token now passes it to the next player in clockwise order, and then a new round begins. And rounds will continue like this until the end of a complete action phase, where one player has managed to either collect at least 12 different protective trees, 12 fire tokens, or 12 sacred flowers. Now, sacred flowers are the one goal we haven't discussed yet, so let's do that now. This is the sacred flower symbol, and you'll find this on cards in your row, trees you've planted, potentially unlocked on this edge of your board, and on victory tokens you may have. If you ever reach a combined value of at least 12 sacred flowers, you've achieved this victory goal. For example, here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, plus I get 2 more for completing this row, bringing me to 7. I get another 2 from this tree, another 1 from this, that brings me to 10, and then 2 more for these tokens. The one that was originally mine, and another that I took from another player when I passed them on the circle board. That brings me to a total of 12. Now remember, you only count as having achieved one of the required goals if it's still completed at the end of the action phase. For example, during the action phase, I might have 12 fire tokens. But then if a player passes me on the circle board, they could take my fire victory token, which was one of my 12 fires, so now I don't satisfy the victory condition. Either way, if someone does satisfy one of the 3 victory conditions at the end of the action phase, they immediately win. Now, if more than one player satisfies a victory condition, you check for tiebreakers. To do this, the players who satisfied a condition instead add together all the values they have for all 3 of the conditions. In other words, they count all of the unique trees they planted, fire tokens they have, and sacred flowers they have on display, and the person with the highest total wins. If there's still a tie, the tied players share the victory. And that's everything you need to know to play Living Forest. If you have any questions at all about anything you saw here, feel free to put them in the comments below, and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, other videos, and lots more over on the games page at Board Game Geek, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like, subscribing, and clicking that little bell icon so you get notification anytime we post a new video. And if you'd like to support us directly, you can join our Patreon team, which I'll have linked below. But until next time, thanks for watching.